as designers of things, we have a bunch of different ways to explore the object that we're dealing with. This is a very basic, simple thing. So if you're working, we have 2-dimensional drawings, we have 3-dimensional stuff in the physical world or digital space. We have fucking writing, diagramming, speaking, talking to other people. I think that it's pretty easy for a lot of designers to get stuck into one of these modes and to kind of like just keep beating the dead horse and to try and get as much out of it as possible, when in reality they need to shift gears and move to a different way of working, right? To break loose and to see it in a different way.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like, like we kind of each have our own medium that we like to use, or like we're better at. Like, I don't know, you're better at sketching, I'm better at 3D modeling, or he's better at writing, right? Mm-hmm. And it's easier to just start with the ones we're better at because we're more comfortable, and we tend to feel good about it more quickly, which is another thing we can talk about later. But there is, like you said, a pretty big array of things that you can use, the tools that are available. So if you feel like you're not progressing, which really is super important in the design process, you got to switch gear and experiment even with a medium that you don't typically use.
I mean, I think even in the broadest scope, you see designers who too quickly limit themselves to one way of, to one medium, right? And therefore their design suffers because they're missing a different perspective.
It suffers, or you can tell, and it becomes repetitive.
That's also too becomes repetitive. This is why actually, a lot of times teachers will tell students like, you got to draw this thing, like you got to draw a floor plan of this thing, or you have to model in 3D. They're always telling you to do something different from what you've done because they know there's something else to be learned. They actually probably know specifically exactly what the problem is, and they want you to figure out and understand what the problem is by working through this other way. I mean, working elevation versus plan, they're very different things.
And that's why it's important to maybe you can have a favorite medium, but really you should use them all. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like there could be a tendency of kind of denying some of them, or like deliberately not using some of them to make sure that the ideas that you want to be validated or tested right are. Which in that case, to me, it's a little, how do you call that? Like, it's a little corrupted design process.
Correct, yeah.
It's corrupted because you're not really testing it objectively.
Right.
You're testing it with an end goal that you've already set.
Right.
Which, hey, hello, like you're too far, you're too early on, and that's not how you should be approaching the thing.
Well, that also reminds me that another portion of the mindset discussion is that I think as human beings, we're always looking for security and for answers.
Right.
And actually one of the fundamental traits of a designer is that you have to go against that and want to always be questioning. Question. And it sucks to do that because it means you never really know what the answer is. And even if you know what the answer is, you're still going to question yourself. So it's an infinite process. But so that lesson extends to in everything that you do, and certainly would apply to in what form that you're working. If you're super comfortable working in Rhino, doing 3D renderings and perspectives and these kinds of things, right? You got to ask yourself, do I not use other ways of working, other ways to test, right? Because I feel that this is what I'm doing is the best way, or is there some part of me that thinks that, well, this is just comfortable, in fact.
Yeah, and you probably won't pass the, section test or elevation test, you know.
Plan test, more like.
And you can lie to yourself and have biases and corrupt the design process, but ultimately it impacts the final result. Mm-hmm. And people will be able to tell. They will be able to tell when they move in the building, like, okay, they didn't think about that, or...
Yeah.
There is a loose end here that's not figured out.
A very common example that we've heard amongst many practitioners, and it applies to myself too, and maybe it's a generational thing, I don't know, but a lot of times people will be working in the computer, right, typically in 3D, or even not in 3D, whatever, in the computer, and again, they're working, and they have this problem they're trying to solve, and they're They're just, again, beating a dead horse. It's not happening, but they keep working the computer. And then they step aside, they pull out a piece of trace or their notebook, and they do some sketches, either freehand completely or maybe overlaid on trace on top of a printout for like 10 minutes. And then they make a huge step in the design process. Why? Again, because they're stepping outside of that being locked into one medium, right? And that specific example is something we hear like by everyone, pretty much. Kind of remarkable.
Or like you were saying, you could be maybe, I don't know, very good at 3D modeling, and you're drawn to creating those like blobby shapes that look really good, right? And then comes the time where you have to present that to some client or teacher and express, where does that come from? What does it mean? Like, what does it do? Why is it like this and not like that? And you've never put words on any of the things you've been working on, you know? That's...
Yeah, you anti-blob or what?
Hey man, I like some good blobs, but you gotta
control your blobs.
You gotta control your blobs.
Well, I think that's also actually, you start to bring up another point, which is you don't want to let the medium you're working with dictate too much the design. That's a bit, you could actually argue both ways on that, but there's something there.
And it's the same thing as what you said earlier with the data of the research. You can't let that lead everything.
Right.
It's at the end of the day, it's a happy marriage of many things, but you know, you gotta pick carefully what will dictate maybe the design. It cannot be something for convenience or something because you're lazy or the first thing that jumps to mind. Like it has to be a little bit more than that.
So I think this first test is productive in the sense of producing probably better design, better architecture, and also allowing yourself to move forward and not feel super stressed out and going down, again, that one frame of mind and getting stuck into it. The next test that I like to use quite often is